He picked up the bag and pulled open the drawstring. So, let us begin. Simple procedure. Come up one at a time, reach into this bag, take one slip of paper, read it out loud. He smiled and nodded. The flesh under his chin bulged in and out. Who cares to be first? No one moved. Lena stared down at the top of her desk. There was a long silence. Then Lizzie Biscoe, one of Lena's best friends, sprang to her feet. I would like to go first, she said in a breathless, high voice. Good. Walk forward. Lizzie went to stand before the mayor. Because of her orange hair, she looked like a bright spark next to him. Now choose. The mayor held out the bag with one hand and put his other behind his back as if to show he would not interfere. Lizzie reached into the bag and withdrew a tightly folded square of paper. She unfolded it carefully. Lena couldn't see the look on Lizzie's face, but she could hear the disappointment in her voice as she read out loud, Supply Depot Clerk. Very good, said the mayor. A vital job. Lizzie trudged back to her desk. Lena smiled at her, but Lizzie made a sour face. Supply Depot Clerk wasn't a bad job, but it was a dull one. The Supply Depot clerk sat behind a long counter, took orders from the storekeepers of Ember, and sent the carriers down to bring up whatever was wanted from the vast network of storerooms beneath Ember streets. The storerooms held supplies of every kind. Canned food, clothes, furniture, blankets, light bulbs, medicine, pots and pans, reams of paper, soap, more light bulbs. Everything the people of Ember could possibly need. The clerks sat at their ledger books all day, recording the orders that came in and the goods that went out. Lizzie didn't like to sit still. She would have been better suited to something else, Lena thought. Messenger, maybe. The job Lena wanted for herself. Messengers ran through the city all day, going everywhere, seeing everything. Next, said the mayor. This time, two people stood up at once. Orly Gordon and Chet Noam. Chet Noam. Orly quickly sat down again, and Chet approached the mayor. Choose, young man, the mayor said. Chet chose. He unfolded his scrap of paper. Electrician's helper, he read, and his wide face broke into a smile. Lena heard someone take a quick breath. She looked over to see Dune pressing a hand against his mouth. She never knew each year exactly which jobs would be offered. Some years there were several good jobs like greenhouse keeper, timekeeper's assistant, or messenger, and no bad jobs at all. Other years, jobs like pipework laborer, trash sifter, and mold scraper were mixed in. But there would always be at least one or two jobs for electrician's helper. Fixing the electricity was the most important job in Ember, and more people worked at it than anything else. Orly Gordon was next. She got the job of building repair assistant, which was a good job for Orly. She was a strong girl and liked hard work. Vindy Chase was made a greenhouse helper. She gave Lena a big grin as she went back to her seat. She'll get to work with Clary, Linda thought. Lucky. So far, no one had picked a really bad job. Perhaps this time there would be no bad jobs at all. The idea gave her courage. Besides, she had reached the point where the suspense was giving her a stomach ache. So as Vindy sat down, even before the mayor could say next, she stood up and stepped forward. The little bag was made of faded green material, gathered at the top with a black string. Lena hesitated a moment, then put her hand inside and fingered the bits of paper, feeling as if she was stepping off a high building. She picked one. She unfolded it. The words were written in black ink in small, careful printing. Pipeworks laborer, they said. She stared at them. Out loud, please, the mayor said. Pipeworks laborer, Lena said in a choked whisper. Louder, said the mayor. Pipeworks laborer, Lena said again, her voice loud and cracked. There was a sigh of sympathy from the class. Keeping her eyes on the floor, Lena went back to her desk and sat down. Pipeworks laborers worked below the storerooms in the deep labyrinth of tunnels that contained Ember's water and sewer pipes. They spent their days stopping up leaks and replacing pipe joints. It was wet, cold work. It could even be dangerous. A swift underground river ran through the pipeworks, and every now and then someone fell into it and was lost. People were occasionally in the tunnels too, if they strayed too far. Lena stared miserably down at the letter B. Someone had scratched into the desktop long ago. Almost anything would have been better than Pipeworks laborer. Greenhouse helper had been her second choice. She imagined with longing the warm air and earthy smell of the greenhouse, where she could have worked with Clary, the greenhouse manager, someone she'd known all her life. She would have been content as a doctor's assistant too, binding up cuts and bones. Even street sweeper or car puller would have been better. At least she could have stayed above ground. With space and people around her, she thought going into the pipeworks must be like being buried alive. One by one, the other students chose their jobs. None of them got such a wretched job as hers. Finally, the last person rose from his chair and walked forward. It was Dune. His dark eyebrows were drawn together in a frown of concentration. His hands, Lena saw, were clenched into fists at his side. Dune reached into the bag and took out the last scrap of paper. He paused a minute, pressing it tightly in his hand. Go on, said the mayor. Read. Unfolding the paper, Dune read, Messenger. He scowled, crumpled the paper, and dashed it to the floor. Lena gasped. The whole class rustled in surprise. Why would anyone be angry to get the job of messenger? Bad behavior, cried the mayor. His eyes bulged, his face darkened. Go to your seat immediately. Dune kicked the crumpled paper into a corner. Then he stalked back to his desk and flung himself down. The mayor took a short breath and blinked furiously. Disgraceful, he said, glaring at Dune. A childish display of temper. Students should be glad to work for their city. Ember will prosper if all citizens do their best. He held up a stern finger as he said this, and moved his eyes slowly from one face to the other, from one face to the next. Suddenly, Dune spoke up. But Ember is not prospering, he cried. Everything is getting worse and worse. Silence, cried the mayor. The blackouts, cried Dune. He jumped from his seat. The lights go out all the time now. And there's shortages of everything. If if no one does anything about it, something terrible is going to happen. There goes my green screen. Lena listened with a pounding heart. What was wrong with Dune? Why was he so upset? He was taking things too seriously, as he always did. Miss Thorne strode to Dune and put a hand on his shoulder. Sit down now, she said quietly, but Dune remained standing. The mayor glared for a few moments. He said nothing. Then he smiled, showing a neat row of gray teeth. Miss Thorne, he said, who might this young man be? I am Dune Harrow, said Dune. I will remember you, said the mayor. He gave Dune a long look, then turned to the class and smiled his smile again. Congratulations to all, he said. Welcome to Ember's workforce. Miss Thorne, class, thank you. The mayor shook hands with Miss Thorne and departed. The students gathered their coats and caps and filed out the classroom. Lena walked down the wide hallway with Lizzie, who said, Poor you. I thought I picked a bad one, but you got the worst. I feel lucky compared to you. Once they were out the door, Lizzie said goodbye and scurried away, as if Lena's bad luck were a disease she might catch. Lena stood on the steps for a moment and gazed across Harkin Square, where people walked briskly, bundled up cozily in their coats and scarves, or talked to one another in the pools of light beneath the great street lamps. A boy in a red messenger's jacket ran toward the gathering hall, the Otterwall Street. A man pulled a cart filled with sacks of potatoes, and in the buildings all around the square, rows of lighted windows shone bright yellow and deep gold. Lena sighed. This is where she wanted to be. Up here where everything happened, not down underground. Someone tapped her on the shoulder. Startled, she turned and saw Dune behind her. His thin face, looked pale. Will you trade with me? He asked. Trade? Trade jobs. I don't want to waste my time being a messenger. I want to help save the city, not run around carrying gossip. Lena gapped at him. You'd rather be in the pipeworks? Electrician's helper is what I wanted, Dune said, but Chet won't trade, of course. Pipeworks is the second best. But why? Because the generator is in the pipeworks, said Dune. Lena knew about the generator, of course. In some mysterious way, it turned the running of the river into power for the city. Hydropower. You could feel its deep rumble when you stood in Plummer Square. I need to see the generator, Dune said. I have ideas about it. He thrust his hand into his pockets. So, he said, will you trade? Yes, cried Lena. Messenger is the job I want most, and not a useless job at all, in her opinion. People couldn't be expected to trudge halfway across the city every time they wanted to communicate with somebody. Messengers connected everyone to everyone else. Anyway, whether it was important or not, the job of messenger just happened to be perfect for Lena. She loved to run. She could run forever. And she loved exploring every nook and cranny of the city, which was what a messenger got to do. All right then, said Dune. He handed her his crumpled piece of paper, which he must have retrieved from the floor. Lena reached into her pocket, pulled out her slip of paper, and handed it to him. Thank you, he said. You're welcome, said Lena. Happiness sprang up in her, and happiness always made her want to run. She took steps 3 at a time and sped down Broad Street toward home. That's the end of chapter 1, and that was a long chapter. So we're going to stop there. A very interesting beginning. I can't wait to hear what you guys think about it. So let's get going on some of that work we have and really look at this chapter and figure out what we think is going to happen next. Until the next time, I will see you guys soon in chapter